Welcome to the Culture Beats podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bournet, and my guest today is former Hollywood creative and author Kay A. Oliver. Hi, Kay.
Hello, nice to meet you in face to face.
Yeah. Great to have you on. So tell me, how did you make the transition from Hollywood creative to author?
In a Hollywood creative, um, you have a lot of people to answer to,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have the executives, the studio executives, the people who put the money into the film and everything. And making a leap into writing novels was twofold. One, full creativity on your
Okay.
own, right? You don't have to answer, you only answer to your readers.
Mm-hmm.
And second is I like strong, intelligent female character leads, protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
And Hollywood, especially during my time, didn't really trend towards that. They loved my scripts. However, uh, strong female leads were not marketable, quote unquote, at the time. So I went ahead and took that leap.
So when you say Hollywood creative, you were a screenwriter.
I did screenwriting, I
Mhm.
did directing, and I produced a couple of shorts. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about your novel Fear Struck. The plot sounds very compelling. So it's about a serial killer who's sort of not exactly imitating, but their crimes seem to mirror the plot of a novelist book that's been
Right. So,
published.
yeah,
Yeah.
Orson Cutter is a bestseller novelist who kind of feels like the conduit of, stories just come to him and he writes them. And he doesn't do a lot of plotting. He does, seat of the pants writing. And he gets arrested and charged with murder because the cops feel that he's following one of his own bestseller books and killing people, and but he knows he's innocent. He's thrown into jail. He's got to figure out how to work the jail system. Very scary.
Hmm.
Can he prove his innocence? Can he survive in jail? Can he prove that he's not the killer? And he also knows, based on the information his lawyer's given him, more murders are to come because there's more murders in the book.
Okay.
So we've got to get out of there, got to prove your innocence, got to find the real killer.
How did you come up with the story? How did the plot idea come to you?
As someone who writes, as a novelist, they
Hmm.
always say, write what you know. I've written a lot of what I've researched, but it came to me in the sense of what would happen if something I wrote started to not be fiction anymore and started to become reality.
Wow.
That is to think about it, daunting
Hmm.
idea.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very scary thought
Yeah.
for
And
sure.
then all of a sudden you're accused of it because it's the quote unquote copycat, if that's what it is,
Yeah.
it makes it look like you.
Yeah, it almost seems like the killer is trying to frame the novelist, like, or sees that it would be very easy to have the blame pinned on the novelist and cover their own tracks.
One would think so, but I
Yeah.
love twists. So yes, absolutely. Without giving it away, one would yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me about the sequel. It's called Blood Seed, is that right?
Blood seed.
And that's where law enforcement is trying to track down the bodies that or find where the bodies have been buried that the serial killer murdered.
Another, yeah, so it's a different serial killer
Okay.
in Blood Seed, but Orson, at that point, had kind of stopped writing his own mystery novels because of what he experienced and having gone through that huge tragedy and drama. And they arrest, actually, it's based on a known serial killer. I don't want to highlight his name because he's
Hmm.
not worth it,
Hmm.
but it is based on a methodical serial killer, and the cops are having a hard time getting through the games he's playing during the investigation and interrogation. And one of the cops who worked on the original Cutter case, where he was charged before, says, "I have an idea. Why don't we get Orson Cutter to pretend like he wants to write a book and make this guy out to think he's this great serial killer, and And in the process, he'll confess where the bodies are. And you start to go through the interview and the things that police and law enforcement have to face, when you're sitting across from a serial killer who you detest and you hate more and more with every word coming out of his cold, unfeeling heart. And you have to swallow all that to get the information you're looking for, and what happens if you don't get it all.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds very true to life because I actually just read recently a nonfiction book by a detective, actually a case that happened near where I live in Ohio. And she talked about how she had to get the serial killer's trust and basically not talk harshly to him, basically say, look, you did what you did and everybody deserves forgiveness, but we need you to help these families have resolution. We need you to tell us where you hid the. So she went into how it made her feel disgusting in a way, but also she also felt like, well, this person at the end of the day is a human being, although they did very heinous things. Yeah, so that sort of dilemma about you have to kind of win the trust of the person who did the crime to get them to open up and give you information, but at the same time, yeah, it's kind of a moral compromise.
Right, and as the person interrogating or trying to get the information out and do all that, does that affect you? I mean, it
Yeah,
affects you. Does that change your life? Do you see things differently? What happens to you? And law enforcement go through this day after day, and
yeah.
we don't tend to. They've got to stuff it down, get rid of it. We always know that there's a case that will follow them their whole life, kind of thing that they will never forget. But that's what this novel is literally dedicated to, those officers and detectives who try to get that information from those individuals, which seem inhuman.
Yeah, so in your novels, you explore the psychological side of crime, right?
Yes, on both of these novels. This
Uh-huh.
is technically my third series that I just
Oh,
started. So yes, yeah.
what got you interested in exploring the psychology rather than just doing a straightforward whodunit kind of mystery?
Um, because I like the intelligence of it, you know, give you more to think about when you read.
Hmm. Hmm.
Sorry,
Bless,
excuse
oh,
me.
bless you.
It is windy out here, so I have allergies, so pardon me. But yes, so I mean, I really like the psychology of it myself. I would not want to be put in that position, so what would I feel like if I was?
Hmm.
I most of my novels are based on something I'm trying to figure out, a what if, my own what ifs. And what if that happened and they asked me to do that, and would I be able to, and how would that change me for the rest of my life? Because I'm sure it would.
Hmm.
So, especially somebody who doesn't deal with it day in and day out, I don't have those um, skills to be able to do what law enforcement continue to do. I mean, I could see people get into law enforcement and then go, yeah, not my cup of tea, I'm out,
Hmm.
because of the things that they see or have to go through. So I like to explore it safely in a book.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you think thrillers and just and also true crime, why do you think it fascinates the public? Because you would think when people are looking for entertainment, they want to escape like the grim reality, but it seems like people really get fascinated with crime.
I think it is the puzzle pieces,
Hmm.
especially the way the true crime shows present themselves. They don't say this is what happened, boom, right? They give you a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. It's and you want to become the detective, and you're trying to go, wait, well, why didn't they talk about this or say that? And as I write more and more whodunits in one way or another, um, I catch things in a show where I'm like, okay, well, they should have looked at that, and then they come back and said, well, we looked at, later on they tell you, and the way they lay it out, it's never a linear, it's never just we looked at the other. All of a sudden, they go back to the second person they interviewed. So I think it's a lot of us trying to figure it out before they give us the result, because we all know at the end, or we get a good feeling of who did it before we ever get to the end. And I think people are patted on the back when they get it right.
Yeah.
even though
Probably
it's not a good story. Yeah,
probably also it in a strange way makes people feel better about their own lives. Like, okay, maybe I have bills to pay and a job I may not like, but at least I my spouse hasn't been murdered, or at least I'm not a victim trapped somewhere by some sadistic serial killer. So
right,
maybe
right.
it's sort of kind of a release of saying, well, my life is not so bad.
Or maybe you're learning from it, so your life won't ever be that way. You won't get
Yeah,
that same
exactly.
scenario, which
Yeah.
is, but they're so cunning, Some of the, suspects are so cunning that you don't even see it coming, and that's the scary part.
Yeah, yeah. The true crime book that I mentioned that I read, this man would lure, he was very handsome and would lure women into places that you think an intelligent person would say, okay, I'm not getting going in this dark woods, dark area patch of woods with this person. But yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
absolutely. Or
Yeah,
they
it does.
bring their children with them, right? There's been
Right,
serial
right.
killers that have the children in the car, then they ask the children to go play while they kill somebody. Things that we would never, it's not in our everyday thinking. And that is tough when you're starting to write. I mean, I've always wondered, where does Stephen King get his ideas? Are they deep in there in him already? You got to wonder. So, exploring things and doing twists and turns really make you be on your toes as a writer and as a reader.
Yeah, and then also I think it probably thrillers and true crime as well kind of raise the moral questions that we all ponder, like why does evil exist? How does someone get to be that twisted that they would do these horrible things, not just once, but over and over again? Do they have any conscience whatsoever?
Right. And in Blood Seed, that killer that I'm referencing loosely in the sense of, not using his real name or anything,
Hmm.
really felt that was his calling, that God made him flawed so that he could do this.
Mm.
That was his answer to that question, which is astounding.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's two schools of thought about, at least among fiction writers that I've heard. One, when it comes to villains, I mean, one school of thought is that there, in a sense, are no villains. Even villains think that they're very misguided, obviously, but they think they're doing something for some grand purpose. Like you
Right?
said, they're driven by some force or whatever. Then there's another school of thought of why does anyone do anything? I remember, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Black Widow with Deborah Winger and Teresa Russell, where
Yes.
Teresa Russell is playing this woman who's suspected of killing these series of rich husbands. And I think Deborah Winger actually says that line at one point, like, I don't know if she was abused as a child. Why does anyone do anything? So,
Right.
yeah,
I
there
mean,
are,
yeah. And you bring up a fantastic point. We go back to their childhood to see what went wrong.
yeah,
And it's not always something went wrong.
yeah, yeah.
It's not the mom's fault or the dad's fault or the whatever.
Yeah, it raises those questions about nature or nurture. It's like if a serial killer or someone like that wasn't severely abused when they were a child and they came from a relatively normal, quote unquote, whatever that is, home, is there something defective in, in their psyche that no matter how they would have been raised, they would have turned out the same way. And that's really scary. If
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Because there are a number of those famous
Mm-hmm.
ones that
Mm-hmm.
didn't have a problem, raised in a good home, had a, loving mother and father, tried to do their best. They saw some quirks about their child, but they thought they'll just get through it,
Yeah.
and they didn't. Yeah,
Yeah. So,
absolutely.
how do you, as a writer, how do you unwind, or how do you, writing about such heavy material, how is it something that you kind of have to give yourself time to decompress after you've been writing, or how do you not carry those really heavy themes with you all throughout the night or day, or after you've finished writing for the day?
Yeah. Well, for me, the beauty of it is I do have three series.
Okay.
So one of them is about an Egyptian archaeologist who has uh, wanted to know if we're disturbing their peace by exhuming all of the
Oh
mummy's
wow.
bodies. And I come up with my own conclusion, but it's much lighter.
Hmm.
It's a kind of different story. And then Sisters in Cold Blood, the Shaw's investigation, is a husband and wife team working on cold cases. So I bounce back and forth. I
Hmm.
don't write book after book after book in a series. My next book coming out will be the fifth book in the Shaws. So
Okay.
I can relax and go back to the Shaws. She's a playful character. Her husband's like, "What are you doing?" She's mischievous, and and they go off and solve things. And then I can go back and I've already started kind of, what am I going to write for book three of the Cutter series.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I loosen in between. I don't like writing them back to back to back.
Sure.
Uh, and it takes me about 6 months to get a book out. So it's to say that every year a book comes out in the series, but it's not like you have to wait 3 years for a book to come out. But that's how I go down and do that, and then I go to tea with my girlfriends. If you want to get grounded, you go out with your best friends who will tell you, whatever you need to hear. So, I do a lot of that. So.
Do any of your friends do you do you recruit them to read your work and give you feedback, or is that would you rather have an editor or someone who's more
Oh
objective?
no, I have an editor.
Uh-huh,
Definitely have an
uh-huh.
editor. But I do use my friends.
Mhm.
So you'll see in my Dr. Callie Worthy series that starts with Disturbed Tombs, my the girlfriend in the book is actually a girlfriend that I know.
Oh,
And I just said, "Can I use you as a character and give me a different last name?" So Doris in the book is a friend I have who, obviously a different name, but I know all her characteristics. The same with Adele. So I use my friends. They all know their targets. And, the saying goes that if you're hanging out with a writer, something you may say or do, which I learned a long time ago in the motion picture industry, will show up in the book. And, I've sat in a screening of a film going, wait a minute, I had that conversation with the director. Now it's in the film. So I've had that experience myself. So I always warn, if I meet someone new, be careful because you might end up in my book. And and I'll say that to him. That's great. That's something I should put in my book. So yeah, I do. I do, and it helps me make very rounded characters because I know a lot of stuff about my friends. I know what they like, what their favorite foods are. Their humor. And so it makes I already know what I'm writing about.
right. Yeah, and kind of going back to our conversation about exploring the psychological aspects of crime and thrillers, I'm starting to see even in horror that that psychological element. It seems like audiences don't just want blood and guts. Because I'm thinking of movies like it's either Neon or A24 that does
Right.
horror, and like there was a movie with Hugh Grant recently called, I think it was Heretic, where
Yeah.
two not Jehovah's Witnesses, more two Mormon girls knock on his door, Hugh Grant's door, and they get into this big debate about philosophy and religion. And it turns out he's a psycho, but they can't tell at first. But it's like it wasn't just blood and guts. It was
Psychology.
psychological and yeah, talking about philosophy and religion. So it seems like even in horror, audiences want kind of a little more depth, not just
Not just blood and guts.
yeah, yeah, murder and mayhem. Yeah,
Yeah, they want to think too. They want to figure out what's going to happen. They want to figure out the twists without being hit over the head with a twist. You
right.
know, yeah. So I love doing that. I put twists in my books where I kind of hint at something, but I don't make it a big announcement in the sense of, oh, when you go back later and the thing happens, you go, wait, she said something up here, and you can't just pull something out of the middle of nowhere because you lose the trust of your reader. You have to have inserted clues without them really knowing that you put clues in the book, and that's a skill and a talent and a challenge at times, which I really give me a challenge. I'm up for it. So definitely, that movie was one of those that you're referring to, where you're just kind of picking up on little things and trying to figure out what's happening.
Yeah, foreshadowing as they call it in writing. And I
Yes.
think it was Alfred Hitchcock who's credited with something to the effect of if you show a gun in Act One, it better go off in Act Two. So it's like you're not just writing about things randomly. It's foreshadowing and setting that mood and building the suspense, as you said.
Right, but you might not point out that they saw the gun. They may just, right? So,
Yeah,
you're not drawing all the attention to the gun. So yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Do you think it's hard as a writer to kind of keep audiences in suspense because people are so jaded now. The average person has seen hundreds of movies. There a lot of readers of certain genres, especially thrillers. They consume so many books. So do you think it's hard to kind of keep the reader guessing?
Yes and no. Yes, in the fact that they have expectations of that,
Hmm.
right? They have the expectations. They might be looking for it. So definitely, but if you're, like I said, it's a skill in the sense of, oh, I kind of mention it and bypassing and then go on to something else in a conversation or something, um, and then it pops up later. So they people who read my books one after another probably start to go, I bet that's a clue, right? Because they know my writing style. You have your own writing voice. So definitely, but there are certain things that they have expectations of, and that's why they keep reading those books because they have those expectations that this book's going to do this, this, and this, tropes as we call them, since you refer back to the writing terms, so tropes, and you need to include those in the books because if you don't have them, then they're not going to be happy with your book.
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah,
yes and no.
yeah, yeah. And I do think readers of mysteries and thrillers tend to be very, very savvy. Like my mom reads a lot of thrillers and mysteries, and she will ruin a movie for you. Like we we saw The Sixth Sense together, and she saw the twist with what's I can't remember the actor's name.
Bruce Willis.
Thank you, Bruce Willis being a ghost. She leans over to me and whispers, "He's a ghost." It's just like she ruined the whole movie
Did
for.
she tell you why she knew that? Because I knew it too.
She didn't. Why do you think? Well, why
Well,
did you know it?
I knew it because I first thought there. I'm sitting there watching the movie, going, "Why did they not spend money on his wardrobe?
Oh, okay.
Cheap." And then I started going, "He's wearing the same clothes over
Okay.
and
Okay.
over. He might take a jacket off, he might take the vest off, but he was wearing the same clothes." And I kept going, "Wait, oh, he can't change clothes."
Okay.
So yeah, so that's what caught me. But that was a different background. So I was just curious what hers was, other than the kid keeps saying, "I talk to ghosts." Like you are one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I honestly didn't think to ask her. I just thought, well, she reads so many mysteries and thrillers that she can see plot twists coming and
You gotta ask.
even though I'm a writer myself, I tend to get absorbed in a story unless it's like something that's like really obvious. I tend not to I don't know why that is. I tend not to pick up on foreshadowing or clues. I just and I'm usually surprised when a plot twist happens.
That's so nice. I
Yeah.
don't have that. I started as a video editor when I started, so I knew how to put stories together
Oh,
and
right.
that kind of thing. So, my thing is like, oh, okay, well, I see why they did that, and jump ahead. And so, very often, I can't even think of a movie that's caught me off guard that I
Oh,
didn't see
wow.
coming.
Wow.
I was watching one movie and they showed the silhouette of the guy the killer on the other side of glass, and I went, "That's so and so, the actor. So he's the killer." Because I was just like, everybody, my friends were like, "What?" I go, "He's got to be." Sure enough, he was. So I mean, it's yeah, I look at things differently with that background.
Hmm.
So if you love films and you love being caught off guard, which I wish I could get that back, but I never. You don't want to learn about films. It
Yeah.
ruins you for life in that sense. But yeah.
Do you think I recently heard an interview with Janet Leigh that Fresh Air rebroadcast about. It was like one of the anniversaries of Psycho, and she was just talking about how revolutionary it was at the time that she was such a big star and that she was killed off, and that's why the movie was so shocking Do you think it's hard to do that with audiences these days because that was what, the 50s? It would be
So I actually wrote an article on this. I'm also a writer for the entertainment industry,
Oh, okay.
and I wrote about how we don't like our heroes being killed,
Mm,
and we put stock into the actors regardless of what their character is. And a lot of people love that actor, like, okay, I'm going to this film because I love so and so, and then when they get killed off, you start to actually feel a death of your person that you are, that you follow and love. And it's a movie, they're not dead, but
hmm.
you still go through that emotional um, wave of
Yeah.
what's happening. And, a lot of people don't like that feeling. So, I did an article on, the actors who have died the most on film and why, why we don't like seeing that. So, that is why you don't want your main hero characters, the leading men or women, to be killed off. It just
Right.
doesn't settle right with the audience most of the time.
Right. Because then it becomes a basically like a tragedy rather than
Right, it
just a,
becomes a
yeah.
tragedy. They were your hero. They can do no wrong. I mean, they maybe have flaws, but they're the ones that are going to save the day. And when they die, they're not saving the day. When
Yeah.
Iron Man dies, everybody's like, "What? What? Why did Iron Man die?" Um, and it shakes people up to literally. You can actually have emotional, feelings when you walk out of that theater upset.
Yeah, and how many TV shows have jumped the shark, as they say, because they killed off a popular character because maybe the actor couldn't negotiate the salary they wanted, or the writers just felt it was time for a change. And yeah,
Too many times in my book. Sometimes having worked in Hollywood, it's like, they get revenge on the actor, and they don't care about the audience. And I like, yeah, does it really mean that much to you to
yeah.
kill off that actor so you feel good? Because your audience isn't going to. So, yeah, they want to make sure they can't come back.
Do you feel there is a fine line between thriller and horror? Something that comes to my mind is Silence of the Lambs. Some people might see that and say it's purely a thriller. Usually, stories that center on law enforcement can be considered a thriller, at least that from my perspective. But some people would see Silence of the Lambs and say, "Oh, this is a horror movie. This is about murder, grisly murders." So what is the line between thriller and horror?
I think thriller has more suspense.
Okay.
So that's why I would put Silence of the Lambs in the thriller category, where if you're just doing horror, you can have kill after kill after kill, and you don't have that big suspense as to who's doing the killing or whatever. But you generally kind of know, you kind of see it. Um, but yeah, thriller, you're trying to figure out what exactly is going on. There's more suspense.
Yeah, that's a great point. What is your advice for aspiring writers, either writers who want to write novels or they want to break into Hollywood writing? Does that the system
Ooh.
of Hollywood write does that even exist anymore where you write the best script that you can, try to get an agent and sell it to a studio or production company? How
Yeah,
how does that
yes,
work?
yeah, yes. Uh, or try to get a book sold.
Hmm.
I'm not really too interested in that, having been there, done that. But
Yeah.
um, you have to write it. That is the number one thing that doesn't happen. There are more people who successfully make it to the top of the highest mountain in the world than there are people who finish a book. By
Wow.
about 59%. There's like 60% of the people who try to make it to top of the mountain make it. The people who start a book, maybe 1% finish.
That's
So the whole
insane.
thing, that's insane. So you need to be able to sit down, write a book, not be judgmental. You have to psychologically tell yourself, I'm an author, I'm writing. Um, and you need to not worry about the book when you're writing it the first time. Don't think you're going to get everything perfect when you first write it. That's not the goal. The first goal is to get the plots and everything down on paper and write it. And then you go back and you start the editing process and oh, I want to move this around, or that should happen before this chapter. Or you're writing away and all of a sudden you go, I should really explain that better, so you can go back. And that's the beauty of writing. It's not, you're not carving it in stone, mind you. You're writing, right? And it's a beast of its own. Like in Backdraft, it's a beast. It has its own life. And you might come up with something that you're writing and go, wait, I didn't even think about doing that. I've had characters take off on me, and I'll be like, wait, he's going to be doing this instead. So even though that wasn't in my plot structure, that's okay. And then finding the right editor. So you want someone who's in your genre, who's interested in your book. I will tell you, I made the mistake on the first couple of books, hiring people I thought were, excellent editors, and they really weren't into the books. And so I would get these comments in reviews about, you should have paid for an editor. And I'm like, but I did. So don't assume I didn't. But I finally found one, and that makes a world of difference because if they're into it and they're reading it and they'll give you ideas and other things. I wish you kind of would have done that. Funny because I was thinking about doing that. So I'll go back and do it. So, there is, but it's like I said, writing. Start with 15 minutes a day. Find a place. I went and bought a new desk. I got a nice little plant. It looks out the window, and I sat down and started writing 15 minutes a day. Now I write much longer. Um, and my dog will tell me when it's time for a walk. So, my writing partner, who's laying next to me right now. But yeah, so you grow into it and you start getting a rhythm, and you don't expect your first. Well, my first book came out, I got 4 awards. I
Oh,
was shocked. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I must be on the right path. But you start getting your voice, and you start learning, what do you feel, how you want to phrase things, what things you like, and you start writing with your voice. And that's where people ask me about chat, AI, and I go, AI can't write in your voice, and it can't write in human. And if you're doing a how-to book, then maybe it's black and white. You can use AI, but for fiction, at least at this time, I would not use AI for fiction writing because things happen in our lives, which I throw in my books. I worked for Steven Spielberg
oh wow.
and Jeffrey Katzenberg, DreamWorks, and kind of noticed that they throw things in where life is things that you just like everyday life, and that's what I throw into my character. Something tragic is happening, or they're looking at something real close up, and I have something thrown in there that like happens out of the blue, and that's because that's what happens in life. Like I always say, you can be walking across the room and all of a sudden trip. If you don't have that in your book, there's no humanity to it. So you need to add that. Make sure that's in there.
What do you think about using AI as a tool, the way you would use a thesaurus or Google something or
Yes, as a tool, absolutely. Give you ideas. Maybe you have a sentence that you keep writing and rewriting and it's just not clicking for you.
Mhm.
Absolutely. It is definitely a tool. It makes nice little emails. Um, there's certain things you have to do for the blurb on the back of the book, certain things that AI is not familiar with, but doesn't mean that you can't write it and then, let it doctor it up a little bit and pick and choose what you want to do. I have a tendency to, and sometimes I just don't even use it, but I will ask AI, give me 5 versions of, and then whatever the sentence is or what the idea is. And then, blend 2 and 3, because I like this part of this and like this part of this, but you manipulate it, but you're using it as a tool. So it's, you're still overseeing that.
Yeah, I actually have a book called The Emotion Thesaurus because I tend to overuse like smiling to express happy. It's like so that I could see using AI for like what's a different way to express happiness other than smiling or
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
But you have to actually ask AI that. So
Hmm.
when it's if you're having it write a story, it'll say smile. And it'll
Uh-huh.
maybe you smile 10 times.
Yeah.
But as you learn as a writer that you are, that you don't really say smile, you say the corners of
Oh,
his
right.
lips
Yeah.
go up and his eyes
Yeah.
got brighter and he started nodding in agreement.
Yeah.
So you describe it instead of say it.
That's
So
great. Yeah.
you don't even have to use that word. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, great idea. I think I'm going to steal that from you.
You can be my
Yeah,
guest. Yeah, you always want to talk about the emotion and the expression and everything on the human face. People know what that is because we all have the same expressions of things. And when you're curious, an eyebrow goes up. Shakes his head like what? His shoulders go up. So you describe that in the book instead of saying he was curious.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Showing, not telling.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you someone who plots everything a plotter versus a pantser? Do you plot everything out, or are you more just kind of write as the story comes to you?
I kind of write as the story comes to me. I have a skeleton of a plot,
Hmm.
maybe. But I see my books, I think, in motion pictures. I don't know if I've trained my brain that way, having worked in the industry for 30 years, but I can see everything I'm writing. Just like when I was directing, you can see what you want to shoot, even if you've done sketch outs, what you want to do, but the layouts. But I always know what the camera angle is, how I want to see things, and I know as a director, I have told people I want to do this, and I've had the cameraman go, "That's impossible," and I'll go, "No, watch," and I'll move their camera and do that, and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh," So I see my stories in my head, which don't go in there. So Orson Cutter's living in there right now. But yeah, so that's how I operate. So I don't really, I'm more of a pantser than a plotter.
Yeah, that's so cool that you've been a director because I'm a writer and filmmaker as well, and sometimes I feel like there's kind of a perception that you should pick a lane, that you should either be a writer or a filmmaker, or you should do one thing or the other. It seems, but I see it as it's all storytelling, and it's just one is using the printed word or words, and the other is
Yes.
using visual imagery.
So I always say I'm a storyteller because both mediums, right?
Yeah.
Film versus paperback books or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, you might want to talk to Kevin Costner, who produces, writes, and directs.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Right. So if you want control of your movie as much as you can, and you do that independently away from a studio, and then you
Yeah.
sell it to a studio, that's how you have that control. Because even if you have a studio funding the film, they have could still have that creative control over you. So you don't really get to do a lot of that until you have the money to be able to do
Sure.
that, right? And the power to do that. And that's why women are fighting for equal pay, so we can make our own stories also.
Yes.
So, yeah, so definitely, it doesn't mean it's always going to work out to your advantage, but it's your baby, it's your Schindler's List.
Yeah.
That was, that's Stephen's baby. Um, I don't know if you'd accept me saying it that way, but that's his thing. It's still his thing. The whole, he has that whole archive that he's building and interviewing people who lived through it. So, the total control when you're a Spielberg, a Cosner, a name like that. You have your own studio.
Hmm.
Tyler, he has his own studio. And that's why women want that equal pay. We want to be that equally as creative because we've got those stories. And the thing with women characters over film over time is they're flattened. I was watching a series that just came out a few weeks ago, and I was watching it, and I'm like, the female characters are flat.
Hmm.
And I said, I'll bet you, to myself or my dog, I'll bet you there's no female writers in the
Hmm.
scripts. And I went and looked at IMDb, and sure enough, they were all men. And I went, you don't get the idea of how women express what they go through, and you don't know how to convey that because you're not showing it. And so, and women have to do that. I don't expect a man to know what a woman thinks and feels, and I don't expect, the vice versa. And so when I wrote my first book with a male leading character, I went and found a male editor. And I said, the
Okay.
reason I'm hiring you is I want to make sure that my main male character in this book is male.
Hmm.
I tell me if there's things written that the guys don't do or things that, but he said, no, you nailed it. I'm sure I didn't nail the first couple of drafts, but eventually you nailed it, and that might become with my uh, media background.
Yeah.
But that is something that we need to be conscious of. not flattening characters, not just, oh, she's going to scream and fall and trip, and they're going to, the guy's going to kill her. I'm so tired of seeing that. See that, I know women who would fight back and give that suspect a run for their money.
Yeah.
And and you're just starting to see that in films because more women are able to make films because they're making the same money to be able to do that.
Yeah, one thing I get bored with as a viewer is seeing an actress who's a really, really good actress being relegated to just the supportive wife or girlfriend. Like she is only there to, whenever the man feels some kind of dilemma, to say supportive things while she's folding laundry or doing something.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly what they're
yeah,
there for, to up the men's role.
yeah,
And no, we have our own role in life.
yeah.
Well, most of my girlfriends, one's married, but most of us are single and have decided to be that way. Because we don't want to be delegated to just supporting role. That's real life. Got to put that in the films. Got to add that complexity that you give to the men. You need to add it to the women. So you need to have a strong woman on your writing team who's going to say, no, that's not right, or we need to add. And it's coming around. Culture's a hard thing to change,
Yeah.
but it's coming around. I mean, Bridgerton is all about complex women.
Mm,
So,
mm.
why is that such a high rated film? That, and they show men naked quite often in that, right? It's the men are the naked people in the show. So, but they're complex women and hiding behind masks and literally, and and someone's writing stories about the town, and everybody's complex and what's going on, and it's not just I'm going to go cook now and make going to
Hmm.
the kitchen to cook now and solve your problems and take So definitely,
You mentioned that some progress is being made. I know Gina Davis has that institute where she examines the status of women in the industry. And it just seems like, especially with directing, it just seems like it just stays the same every year. It's like such a small percent. And I guess it helps with directors like Chloe Zhao being nominated for Best Director sometimes. But what is your sense of the, especially behind the scenes, as you were saying, with writing and directing?
you know, just like here, this is the example I normally use. When Barbara Streisand made that film Yentl,
Hmm.
the best, everything but director.
Yeah.
Barbie comes out, best everything but director. So has it really changed that much? No, the culture is still, it is a male dominated culture in Hollywood from the start. And, like I said, culture's the hardest thing, but, when we get, the equal everything, then we can start doing the same things
Hmm.
and bringing forward, the kind of films that we want to see or learn about or the characters we want to build with substance. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. There aren't that many female directors. Absolutely. In fact, on a set, you might have some issues as a female director unless you have the same people you've been working with. When you go to say something and do something, they'll be like, no, no, they feel like they have the right to tell you, no, I'm sorry, who's the director?
Yeah.
And you have to, and then by putting your foot down there, oh, you're such a,
B word.
and it's like, yeah, no,
Uh,
if it was a guy would be saying the same thing to you. So, you know, um, yeah, so that could happen.
yeah. Like you said, culture is hard to change, and progress, unfortunately, isn't linear. It's like take one step forward, then two steps back, and yeah, it just
Right.
keeps the same cycle keeps going over.
We as women need to be assertive and not aggressive,
Hmm.
and and just too bad we don't need everybody to love us. I'm there to do a job, and if you don't like the fact that I'm telling you what to do and you're a guy, get over it or find another job. And I literally, I always start off my sets with I'm the director. And I do want to hear ideas. I'm the final word. If you've seen Star Trek, the captain is always the final word. He asks all his people who are knowledgeable, and he makes the decision. And I use that because everybody understands that, story, that parable in a sense. And and I always would start it off. And if you're going to be an issue, da da da, I don't mind losing you in a heartbeat. You are replaceable. So people know exactly where I stand when I start before we ever start shooting. and reading script.
So that's obviously it's necessary to set that tone rather than
I have
people,
found it.
yeah, people not taking you seriously and undermining you and like you said, trying to co-direct
Right,
or
and and even with that, you'll still get people doing that,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
watching the Blake Lively and the other thing, I'm like, my brother's follows Hollywood more than I do, and he'll call me up and go, "What's going on with that?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. Just write it off. I don't know why you're even interested."
Yeah.
So I said I almost like a PR stunt because I don't think anybody would have gone to see the movie had those two lawsuits not been out there.
Hmm.
So, you never really know. That's
That's true.
unfortunate. Is this a whole stunt to get you to go see the movie and find out what's going on? I
Yeah.
don't know. So, what's true, what's not. I wasn't on set. I don't know. I'm not talking to anybody who was on set. So, who knows?
Yeah. Well, Kay, it's just been fascinating talking to you. So if people want to get your books and get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
I have my own website, which is my full name, Kaya Oliver, Oliver.com. And my books are also on Amazon. So you can author central me or look up Blood Seed and then click on my info down below and see all the books. I have 15 books out right now. Most of them, I think every single one of them but one has won an award, and I did not put that one up for an award. So Blood Seed has won an award already, and Fear Struck has won three, and it's only been out since December. So I really enjoy my writing, and the awards just pat on the back. But when I hear people say, "Oh, I read that book and I couldn't put it down," or I like throwing a lot of true information, as you know. In fiction, you
Hmm.
have to have real information, and I like to do a lot of research. And people will say, "Oh my God, I didn't know that was true, and I had to go look it up because I read your book." And oh my gosh, you're right on the money. So I love it when they grow also when they read my books. So yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever considered writing a book on writing about how to write in the different formats, script format, novels, how to translate directing experience into storytelling through a novel. I think a lot of writers would be interested in that.
On my website, if you do kaoliver.com/blog, you'll have all my stuff on, for anybody who's an indie writer, beginner writer,
Hmm.
tips on building characters, how to write, the books and all of that. And I stick to the books mostly. Hollywood's kind of behind me.
Hmm.
And Hollywood is constantly changing because when I started, big cameras, you had to tune them, big batteries to go with them, and now you're walking around with them on your phone. So, a lot of technology has changed a lot of the industry. And there are script writing um, things that
Courses.
you can buy.
Yeah.
No, that the formats that you
Oh
can
yeah.
buy that just plug stuff in. So it's the telling of the story, as you know,
Hmm.
that is the bottom line of any good Oscar-winning film. It all starts at someone's typewriter or writing or however you're doing it, and building that story. And if that story is not good, the rest of it falls apart. So you really have to start with the story and building your characters and your storylines.
Absolutely. Well, Kay, I look forward to reading your books and I'll definitely check your blog out.
Okay, yes, please. It's free. You don't have to give me your email address or anything. I want to be able to help people, discover the things I've already learned, and hopefully, they don't make the same mistakes. They make their own.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we all do. But that's the beauty. Like I said, it is a beast. It is an animal. It is alive, and you can manipulate it. It's not like you're chiseling out of marble. You're working with clay. So, and that clay can turn into a golden statue. But yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Kay.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. If you like this video, please leave a comment, share it, and subscribe to my channel.